All right. Good morning, everyone. This is Youngstown's Talk channel down from Youngstown Studio. Do the show in the mornings. We miss talk radio in our area. Such a valuable tool for the public to have a way to sort of like share opinions and perspectives. You get to know people in your community, and I think it's a great outlet for us sharing ideas that we can take our creativity and put it out into the world. We spend a good deal of time pointing out problems, and I think less time with floating our own solutions rather than criticizing the solutions of others. So I want to talk. Yesterday we were talking a lot about city of Youngstown and how we would do it different if we had the scepter. None of these things, whether you're talking about national politics or local government and politics, that it's not like a simple single mistake. Most of it is more philosophical. So, for instance, we take a lot of wisdom from our founders, the people who really thought through this. We looked at the oppressive tyrannies that they were dealing with, and how would we want to forge something that worked, right? That had longevity, that would live beyond their lifetimes, and so on. And so there was a lot of wisdom in the foundation. I think probably one of the most, probably the group of the most sophisticated people, thought leaders, and some of the wisdoms exist today and are still true. And I think what they got really right was there's no utopia, right? And what nature teaches us is that you have these swings between two opposing pressures is where you get it right. So for instance, if I use the farm analogy a lot, where there's a time where harvesting is a priority, and there's a time when nurturing and planting is a priority. And those two things working together means that you have an effective deal. The harvesters are going to think that they're most important, and let's always harvest, but reasonable objective people will say, if you always harvest, right, where's the next generation of fruit going to come from? And then the planters think that their priority and most important, they will fight and advocate for their portion of the contribution. But it's only the wisdom, people standing back saying, no, both of you are necessary. And the push and pulls between the two sides is what gives you a nice balance in the middle. And one of the thoughts, and this is mentioning, we were talking about the city of Youngstown. We call it corruption. We call it, bad decisions. We call it bad planning or whatnot. And I want to float some philosophical ideas that doesn't correct it, because in politics you never actually correct it, but you make it better, right? You take a snapshot of where it is and you try to improve it, and giving both sides of the equation a chance to be able to integrate some of their ideas into the system. So you have, sometimes you're in the losing position, sometimes you're in the winning position, but yet you're still, you're still valuable in the process. So the founders said that the noble intentions, or the Christian or God-fearing elected officials, were necessary, because if you, for instance, let's just say you had an office, or even your house, right? And so you circulate your spare keys with your neighbors. Well, it takes a certain kind of virtue in order to have the responsibility of someone else's keys. And so if I had your keys and I could just, I knew it was for, you forget your keys, you can get in, you're on vacation, you may go check something out. And you have to have sort of like trust of the authority that responsibility is not going to be abused, where you're not going to just walk in my house and steal my television. So there's a trust that's extended to the person, where, where you're giving them that, that idea that, and the thing is, if you don't trust the people in your neighborhood, then you can't give out the keys to those. So let's just say you were able to make, you're the mayor, right? And what we need in the downtown area is we need a pro-business administration. We need a pro-business philosophy. If you want to attract consumers and get people walking around, you have to provide services and products that those people will want to be there. I mean, you can attract somebody down the first time and they'll do it out of the goodness of their heart to check out what's going on. And if there's nothing to do or there's nothing to consume, if the products and services that are being offered were not for you, right, then you're not going to make it a regular thing to come downtown and to walk around and to buy products and see shows and, eat at restaurants and whatnot. So the pro business is, okay, so if you do a marketing campaign and you say, come downtown, it's awesome, then you have to attract businesses that are awesome, because consumers we're really spoiled. We don't like making concessions. So when we say something, there's like no parking, right? It's not the obligation to then convince the people who want to park right in front of the business they're going in to walk 3 blocks, right? So you have to create the product that people will not be conceding to support, but is being accommodated. You're not more important than the consumers you're trying to market to and come down and use your services. I use the parking because that's one I've heard since I got involved in business in the downtown area. We put it, I mean, I can name 3 people who really drilled in to supporting Youngstown. And the first person that I ran into was Phil Kidd, a proprietor downtown, used his platforms to attract people in, tried to give, just advocated for the downtown area. And then you have Derek McDowell, who is running for mayor right now, and he also expends a lot of his time and treasure into it. And then Mark Canzanetta, he was on the show yesterday, another person who said specifically, I was advised against doing what I'm about to do by people who know there are easier ways to make a buck. There are easier places to put a restaurant. There's an easier haul anywhere except the place that I chose. And we make these sacrifices and try to help the downtown by, and all we need is a little reciprocation. So if you're the city government and you have people willing to, carry the water, all you have to do is support them and show them that and acknowledge them and show them that you're appreciative of what they're willing to do on your behalf. Because technically you've got outside sources that aren't being compensated, that are willing to do the job that maybe a city developer, city promoter, city marketing person would be doing if they weren't doing it for them. Right. So you got free help that just love the city and are willing to do that. And like I said, all it takes is, couple conversations, meeting with them, giving them the resources they need, lending in support to them, and let the people who truly love the area to do their thing and not feel like, you ever make a recommendation to someone, hey, this is a really good restaurant, and then people go experience it and you want it to, you vouched, so you want the restaurant to absolutely come through. You want the food to be great. You want them to be seated, the service being excellent, so that when they report, they point at you and say, hey, I trust your vouching. You laid down a good recommendation. And so the solutions are, I'm a business person. And the way that you get something that is authentically, successful is first, in this case, you're going to have to seed it first off. So you're going to have to put a lot of subsidies and a lot of bait down to get both people downtown and then the types of businesses that you want to recruit into the downtown area. So you poll the people that would come down and say, what would it take to get you here on a Friday night and want to do it willingly? And what are the obstacles that are in your way? And what are you, why aren't you doing it right now? Well, they're going to say, well, I can go to the suburbs and the parking lot, I can park right there. There's seating. There's close stuff, the stuff that I want to do next, like a movie theater is right next door, or, there's different, it's not just going to one spot. I want to line up a couple things. And then you might have another person that says the suburbs is where I live. The restaurants are close to where my home is. So if I go downtown, there's got to be a reason, like there's got to be a bigger reason. So I might get dinner before I go to the Covelli Center and see a hockey game or something at Dior. The orchestra's playing, or there's some theater some performance that's going on. And then, doing a good job at making it be a destination means that you also help the businesses to be able to provide the experience for the people that show up, because they're comparing you against something that in all their other judgments is better for them. And, I think the free parking on weekends really helps. But as Isaac said yesterday, he came down and it was a ghost town. There was not many people, and businesses that are set up where they have to string along, months of break even or some losses and expect them to keep doing it and taking on the chin is not a fair expectation. And you can't do that long term. I want a business that can come into town, gets public support, the city supports it, makes it as easy as possible to get in and around, and attracting more and more of the stuff people actually want down there. That's the kind of government, instead of it just being, I always picture Youngstown as a city that behaves above its pay grade. They want to behave and act like they were a big city, when in reality, they need to be a small community that knows everybody's names and knows the leaders' names, but and supports those leaders. And I think they want to be a little bit bowed to as Youngstown. I would much prefer, if let's just say I was running for mayor, I would much rather go to a Struthers or a Canfield, some kind of smaller town where I could have a bigger and direct effect on the population. Smaller community, you can take more liberties. I think one of the mayors in our area, Mayor Cat in Struthers, I've spoken with her a number of times about business development. Probably one of the most active business mayors that I've ever met, and always stringing together potentials and opportunities. They have good marketing. They care about the businesses, and probably see the mayor more than the Youngstown mayor sees it. So if I were to run for mayor, so first off, I wouldn't do that. I think there's only one segment of mayoral duties that I would really care enough and be passionate about, would be helping economic development and business. And I think an appointee, I could probably play that role in city government and get the blessing of a mayor that would, I wouldn't do it under Tito. I just don't think that he believes in, business development like I would need an executive of the city to be. We would have to bring somebody who's got true business bona fides for me to know that the rug wouldn't be pulled underneath me. I mean, right now we don't want to get into, we're a desperate town willing to take on every business venture and then get us embroiled in a bunch of controversy about businesses that wash out, because the public already, the blemishes of the past make the public believe that anything that comes into town is going to be a cluster. I want to talk to someone from another state who's thinking of expanding into, the Northeast or even Northeast Ohio, and say, this is a town that I want to do business with. Think about what we have, the positives. Number one, we have a labor force from everything from the industrial base all the way down to specializations. We have talent here. So we have access to a good bit of talent. We have all of the utilities that are still built up around manufacturing. So we have access to power, we have access to water. We're blessed in that because we don't have to build it. It's already here. We're centralized, where we have connections to rail, we have connections to air, we have connections to regular road transport. So if I want to do business, really the only obstacle, cost of living is low. So operating and the labor costs are low, raw materials are low. So if I'm a business, I'm like, well, Youngstown is prime for going in there and, being able to be even more competitive manufacturing wise. So what would get in my way? What would be my obstacle that someone from Tucson, where the cost of living is higher, and maybe they don't have all the advantages, that would say, yeah, I'm not going to mess with Youngstown. They make it too difficult to actually operate. So we'll say out in Lordstown, they were building that big warehouse. I think it was the TJ Maxx warehouse. Maybe it was that one. I don't know. But they were building something out that way. And Lordstown was all about it. They were attracting those kind of buildings and that kind of industry. But the people who lived there were made it extremely difficult, and maybe even to the point where made it harder to attract the next generation to come to the area. So are we welcoming with industry, and what industries will we tolerate? Or will we take any industry and be happy that someone at least pays attention to us and has interest in our valley? And I think, you can do a hybrid of both. So the Sobe energy plant downtown, that it's more like near the Mahoning River. So it's not quite downtown, but it's in close proximity. That's a disappointment to me, because it seems like there are, for those who don't know, so Sobe is a way of, they basically pressurize tire, rubber, they take plastics. I think it's all three. And basically they have high heat, they pressurize it, and they use the gases that come off of that combustion to power things. They create energy from burning these tires. And so the first thing, if you're a reasonable person, you're like, okay, well, this sounds extremely dangerous. Sounds like it could be a pollutant. Let's cover our bases here and see if that's the case. Do we want this industry in our downtown? I consider it to be something that's rather innovative. We have lots of post-consumer materials that go in landfills and are just wasted. There's some energy in there, and if there's a technology that unleashes the energy from burning those tires, let's ferret it out. Let's create a commission. I don't want to say no to it, because I just don't want that industry here. If it proves out that it can be done safe, if you're providing power, if it seems like it could be a good thing, then put it through its paces and see if it could be a good thing. But I think we're obstructing on this, and we're making it so that we don't want it, in spite of anybody that researches it or knows about it or has reported on it says that it can be done safely. It's being done in other places. Why not here? So again, the origin of the curiosity is, let's make sure it's safe. And if it is safe, then let's let it expand here. If we can get, energy production done right here in Youngstown, given entrepreneurs a chance to innovate through it and find out if it's a deal, make it small, proof of concept, get the support of the community. But I don't like that a community can just shut it down. I mean, you can take a couple examples. Let's just say, a strip club comes to town, and you don't want that kind of industry, or a dispensary comes to town and you really don't want that industry. Now that's a different argument, where the voters can say, yeah, that brings down property values. That would be a big disturbance. We just don't want those types of businesses in our community. But the argument for energy production, which we are, we're all about the alternatives and innovating. So that's going to be a big marketplace. If we can have one of the people who are innovating in that space, win or lose, just giving them a chance to, to see how it works with the stipulation. So if I'm in the seat and I want to issue a permit, then I'm going to make sure that we have high standards to make sure they're not doing any of the things that we fear they might be doing. Let them produce, and on the other side of it, make it a sunset where you got a year to put up the numbers. You got a year to show that it could be done safely, create jobs, and we can provide power for some of those factories that are down by the Mahoning River. But to just be able to shut it off and get in, it'd be an obstacle. It's not necessarily that one. But what about the other innovators when they're trying to pick a home for trying to ferret it? If it's not a popular thing and the city could just turn off the permit because they feel like it, then I'm going to pick another community, one that's going to be, more accommodating. And I think through, the taxes, we've given tax abatements to attract companies to the area. Our labor has to get in line so that we're not fighting against the company because we disagree with either their union or non-union. A job is a job. And if someone's willing to bring payroll to a certain area, I would rather have some payroll rather than no payroll. And so we just got to, like I said, we got to get out of the old mindset that we're higher and mightier than the companies that are giving us, some attention, because we get off of their list, and then they don't give us a second look, and it's a blemish. It looks bad that we're just not open to development. We only want certain industries. These ones are on our, naughty blacklist, and we don't give them a true shot. But yet we'll involve ourselves in like the chill can plan, where it goes totally sideways, and somehow we manage to, mess that one up. So it's weird, this dichotomy of like, sometimes I don't think we do due diligence when we like something, and sometimes we do not enough or too much due diligence, and we completely get in the way of an industry from flourishing or becoming anything. So my original point was the founders. The first part of it was, you have to have virtue and nobility in the people that are in power, so that we can give them responsibilities, and they're not going to just wield them in a way where they pick their friends and favorites and become corrupt. So how do you get on, like, I feel that I run a very neutral platform, right? I'm not overly friendly with everyone. I don't make enemies. I just kind of do my thing. And when people need something, they come and talk with me. I don't try to become friends with people in the business community, because it's just not my forte. Socially, I'd rather just look at spreadsheets and numbers. And so having, positioning myself to be the favorite and picking me over other people, that disheartens me more than anything. When you go into an area, and let's just say you try to do business, and they're doing business within family or friends, right? And so they never consider you an option, because you're not within that little circle. So in a way, that's the origin of corruption, is who you choose to do business with, whether or not you're picking out services and products based on the merit of your services and products versus who you know and who's doing a favor for you and whatever. We're the beneficiaries of that all the time. And it works out for us when somebody, needs something, they get a referral. Now they're only doing business with you because of the relationships that you made, rather than buying services and products just because they're awesome. I was kept out of a lot of the loops. When I started in business, there was a lot of ethnic groups that would only deal with inside their own ethnicity. And so if you were a service provider, they would give first right of refusal to the people who looked like them or talked like them or had the background that they had. So as the outsider, you're like, well, what do I do here? I can't change my ethnicity to be included as an option. I would prefer the marketplace to be devoid of preferential treatment depending on who you are. So if we can't do it in the business community, how can we expect when government officials get in power that they don't just handpick the people they deal with based on whether or not it's skin color or where they came from or their social class or any of those things? It feels kind of dirty, but that's, how we orient ourselves as human beings in that hierarchy. And I did infiltrate a couple of those ethnic groups where I was really good at what I did. And so I was invited in some of those, and they were point blank told me that, usually we don't deal with outsiders. We deal with people who we trust and know have our back and reciprocate their business with us. And it works out a little bit in theory that you can trust people within your own block. When you start including the diversity of other groups, there becomes a different rule books that people play with. So that's why I say these pressures are, we need virtuous people that pick virtuous principles when they select appointees and who they hire and how they orient themselves. So if I were to go downtown and I'm picking the best businesses to put in this area so the consumers come down here, how do I pick those people? Am I going to go to the people who have helped me over the years and pick out of the people that I know? Or am I going to just go to the marketplace and judge them based on grocery store? We need one of those to sell items to people who live downtown. And let's see who's doing that the best and go to them and pick them. Or am I going to be like, which ones are my friends? Which ones give me kickbacks, or which ones give me expediency where I get political capital because of who I chose? And which direction do you think that goes more often? And it's the same thing that you and I will do in our own lives is what happens then in government. Jerry says, by the way, if you want to call 330-595-1600, you can get on the program and talk about this. Jerry says EPA approved it and community influence denied it. When their neighbors get it and welcome a new growth, they will cry about it or want a benefit from it, has been vetted through EPA and town hall meetings to answer questions, but mentality of community was we don't want it and had nothing to rebut as to why. They use speculation to pressure the city administration to say no. This is just like the lifting of restrictions on coal mining that just took place by the government. And yeah, that it's one of those things where I'm not even looking at this effect. It was a small operation, proof of concept, but when other companies who have maybe something similar, let's just say I want to set up photovoltaics, solar panel manufacturing, and if I come to invest in an area and I get started, and then I know that I'm going to get grief from either the citizens or the governing, the people who are issuing permits or the governing bodies. You're not going to be top of my list because it's hard to do business with you. You created too many obstacles that don't make sense. And every community can pick whatever they want to do, but you can't have it both ways. You can't be hugely discriminate in what you offer to in town, and then also say, well, we need more options, because if you make it difficult, the next person is not going to knock on your door and move operations to a city that is hard to deal with. And so that's if you're if the next administration is pro business and they put people on it to attract people to the area, and then you don't orient your city councils and the people that go in along with that, they're just going to be embarrassed where they made the referral, someone gave you a look, they came to town, got punched in the mouth and said, yeah, thanks for the referral, but no thanks. These people are too difficult, too hard to please, come up with creative ways of reasons why we shouldn't do it and whatnot. And I don't know what goes in the minds of city council, how they can take the SOBI manufacturing and just be against it for the sake of it. If they're representing their constituents, if their constituents are telling them that they don't want it, then that's fine. But it again, you're not going to attract new companies if you already make it hard on the ones. I'll give you an analogy. So when they deregulated utilities, the first thing that happened in Ohio when they deregulated them was a lot of like really, gray area companies were the first to strike, right? So you ask yourself, okay, if we deregulate, why the reputable companies weren't the first to dive in? Why was it these, a little suspicious of these small operations that were willing to take advantage of a new law or a new rule? And well, it's because the big money, the big operators, they're not quick to jump into things, and they take their time. They make sure it's a good investment before, when they're picking locations or picking services to provide, they got to make sure their certainties are pretty high that this is going to work out. They've got investors and people that are on their boards that they're not looking to make an unsuccessful operation, where the fly-by-night companies are the first to pounce, and they're a little schemy and a little scammy because they don't have to make it successful. It's worth a risk and a gamble for the first level to come through here. And it took a while before, it's probably a bad example using the utilities, but on principle, it's exactly what happens. Why, if we had the chill can, if we had the Lordstown Motors, if we had the SOBI plant, and these all seem like they kind of fizzled and something went sideways without really having a solid explanation as to what happened. So if, the Joseph's company that did the chill can, I mean, they're a reputable company. They operate in other parts of the country and they're doing well. So I don't know the origin of the idea and why Youngstown was picked. It might have been because they had the area and they had some subsidies, some low interest loans or whatever. And it made it appealing to be able to, take a gamble and see if you could get something started. But what about established companies like an Amazon, distribution hub or something like that? Something that, is not fly by night. They're a big operator. They've got a lot of cash to be able to spend. When you attract those people, those are your golden goose employers. And it should be almost like on a slip and slide into town. If somebody takes interest, we make us a very good candidate to place your company. and we support you all along the way and not make it difficult, to deal with. So that's sort of like, if I had the scepter and I wanted to make Youngstown great again, it would have to be not just a person that would bring people down to uh, the valley. It would have to be an overall new goal with the downtown is to be pro-business. And how does one convince the people in Youngstown to go pro-business, that no matter what, you create a group of enemies that try to kill and shoot down any ideas, that you have. We get hung up on, like, if I brought in, let's just say there was a manufacturer in Canfield and they wanted to bring something downtown and they didn't live in the city of Youngstown. Well, on a preferential standpoint, you want as many of the Youngstown people to work in downtown Youngstown. You want the jobs to come from Youngstown. You want the businesses to be Youngstown, because that ultimately helps the tax base in Youngstown. But if you can get a business from anywhere to be able to come down, you might have preferred make it 100%, in-home Youngstown residents and whatever. But then the second thing is, well, I'd rather have somebody operating rather than nobody operating. So maybe you do give a little bit of an incentive. So if you live in the state of Ohio, you get an incentive to go to an Ohio college. You get an in-state tuition, right? If you're outside, you can still do it, but it just costs a little bit more and there's less incentives to draw you in, but it's still possible. But we kind of make it impossible. It's almost like if it's an outsider that doesn't live in Youngstown, we do our best to kind of shoot it down and not even shoot it down, just be highly critical of it and get hung up on the who's doing it rather than what's being done. So wanted to bring that up off the rip of the show. 330-595-1600 is the phone number. Tariffs, we were on the radio all last week, and we talked a good bit about what's happening with tariffs in the United States, and the storyline just continues to go. And we watched as we had a couple of really hardcore down days as the economy and the business community try to figure out what the rules are going to be. And the people who are critical of this have every right to be. This is probably one of the biggest economic gambles that I've ever seen an administration take, and they're not backing off of it. So they are double and tripling down on what the tariffs mean and what it could potentially do. I said last week that probably my only one of two countries that I thought was going to be very problematic was China. I knew that they were going to play hardball. I knew that they had a lot of chips in their corner that they were going to leverage right back at us, and you saw that play out over the last couple of days. And then you had European Union. The EU is also pretty hardline about what they're willing to do with the United States. So we just got a sense over the last couple of years that we classified a lot of these countries as allies, and they weren't as big an ally as we thought. They were, sugar babies is what they were. They were definitely liked being associated with the United States because of the benefits the United States played. It definitely took advantage of the relationship. And when we ask for a little bit more, it makes all of those people who are definitely taking advantage of it, they're a little bit uncomfortable that their advantage gets taken away. But I think in any relationship, even, personally and socially, that when you feel like you were getting shafted a little bit, or what you were bringing to the table was more valuable than the other person, it's got to be righted. So we deal with businesses, right? And a lot of times the situation and partnerships that come across our table is that you have the financier, right? The people who brought the money and the contacts to the table. And then you had the labor and operations, and both of them are necessary. So the labor people will always say, well, I'm more important in this partnership. He just brings money. He sits in an air-conditioned office. He really doesn't do anything. He just makes the opportunities happen and he finances it. So I'm definitely more important in this arrangement. And then you have the financier who says, well, I brought the money. Without the money, you couldn't have done anything. And so when you get these two people talking, they're both convinced that they could do this without the other one. And it usually starts a fight, and it splits up a lot of, really good friendships and whatnot. The minute that you think you are getting the short end of the stick, even if you talk to China, you would probably get the exact opposite of what you're hearing from me. They probably think, well, the United States is taking advantage of China. China could be we're propping up and buying all of their debt. They probably have lots of reasons why, the US is getting a better part of the deal. But if you just let it go on, and it truly was not in the best interest of the United States, if I sell you lumber, you tax it 100%, and if I buy your whatever, tax it at 0%, well, that's definitely you're getting the better benefit. You're protecting your industry for what you're buying from me, and I'm not protecting my industry at all. So let's just come to the table and talk about how to make it more fair for both sides. And I think, when we have these partnerships that want to split up, because of they think they're getting the short end of the stick, we push them back together, and you can either bow out, and then the things I've listed out that you're getting from the other side, if you're cool with them not being there anymore, then split up. You obviously would be happier together. Buy them out of the money that they have invested. You part ways. You go do your own things. Or maybe you just kind of take somebody for granted after a while, and you forget how much they're actually doing and how dependent you really are on them. And, in order to have a good negotiation, both parties have to be willing to break up and also have to be willing to stay together. Now you can get through differences and put it out on the table. Obviously, each side is going to play for their best interest, and you make some compromise, in the middle. And I just don't think, outside of what Trump was willing to do and put his administration on the line for this gamble, I don't know of a president past or a president future that would ever take this risk. So half of me is happy that at least what I think needed to be done, even if I don't agree with how it was done, that it needed to be done. I'm happy for it. And I am holding my breath that this does not go sideways, and they do see it through, and there is compromise, and we can get back to some normalcy. But the argument is, like, how long is it going to take? How long are you willing to look at your 401k and the stock market going down how many days in a row before you're like, come on, you had your time. Let's, go back to the old thing. At least it was working. Even if it was bad, at least it wasn't this dysfunction that we have. So, but you can use that wisdom and philosophy and apply it to a lot of other places in government. You have disagreement. And are we good at, do we want to be good at making concessions and making good deals with other people that take them in account and they take us in account? Then you have a real ally, someone who's looking out for you as much as you're looking out for them. Or are we just going to be leveraging everyone? And, we're going to we're more powerful than you. So we're going to conquer you economically because we can. We're going to squish you when we need to and force you to do what we want you to do. And I think both America and China are completely willing to put the pressures on one another to get their way. And that might be a major impasse. And so we got to factor in that what happens if we get 90% of the countries to play ball because we can squish them and we can leverage them. I think our country is more virtuous. I don't think we're going to use our economic power to exploit someone. I think we're just going to make it fair. I do think that China might be off the table. I think they might, we might be able to box them in with this. So if you think about it this way, so they are an output country. They have billions of people that they can make work for very little money. And so they can manufacture like nobody else can on a price or cost wise, right? And they're a rival to us in everything from economy to military and whatnot. So they're an adversary. If you want to make a could be adversary into at least a dependable partner, right? And if you have 90% of the countries who knew that you can squish them if they wanted to, and you used enough leverage to get them to shore up some of these unfairnesses, then if you have that group of people and you want to punish China, because if we're not buying from China, all they're going to do is find a dancing partner that will buy off of them. And then, so if we're not buying, there's going to be some country that will benefit from the resource of having really inexpensive goods being produced for them. So that's, they like us because we are consumers, probably one of the best consumer nations that there are, but they'll dance with other partners. But if part of the agreement is if you deal with us, then you can't deal with them, and we leverage China out of the marketplace, they're brutal. And so the pressures we have to put on them might be more brutal than we would put on Canada or the EU or anybody else that we're dealing with. So again, my hope is that we get some concessions from some of our would-be allies and use those as examples of how easy it is for us to negotiate back off of those tariffs while giving United States manufacturers an advantage. And I think over the course of 5 or 6 years that we could probably attract some of those international dealers that it would be advantageous for the market in the United States to deal with the market, that you bring some of your operations here. So like Toyota did back, I think it was in the 80s, in order to, we did protectionism. We tried to take the big 3 auto manufacturers and give them market access and kind of hold the foreign dealers out of the country. Well, the negotiation was you had Honda and Toyota that started bringing some of their manufacturing operations to the United States. And since we bought those cars and they were manufactured here, they can do it competitively. They didn't move their whole company here. They just brought enough operations to qualify for a better tax rate. And I think that's sort of what we'll see on the other side of this, is even if we're not, organically manufacturing all of our raw materials and our products, that we give companies, just like the TikTok thing, we give those companies a reason to bring operations here where they can be properly regulated. We're not buying iPhones that are taking advantage of, poor countries to produce the phones that we carry around in our pockets. And then somehow we have sort of like a moral disconnection where we don't feel responsible for a 12-year-old kid mining the lithium that went into that cell phone, or the assembling the iPhones in a country where someone's being paid $1. Once you're exposed to that and know that that's what you're subsidizing and buying, it's harder to buy that product, right? So let's just say the iPhone costs, $1,200 right now, and moving manufacturing to the United States where there are proper regulations adds $400 more to that cell phone. Would you be a buyer knowing that you're subsidizing your neighbor's paycheck rather than the 12-year-old miner or the 12-year-old assembler in China? We did a bunch of manufacturing. And I will tell you, when we shopped out and sourced a lot of our materials to be produced, China was about 25% the cost that an American provider with the exact same product, the same exact manufacturing procedure. And it was about 4 times as much to produce it in the United States. And these were small things. So an end product that you would sell for $200 on the market, maybe $250 on the market. I can get a local producer to do about $50 manufactured out the door. And it was like $11 in China. China was harder to, they obviously have these big plants where we had to wait, multiple months for them to produce it. And they took the first whole part of the year off where they didn't produce anything. So it was tricky, but the cost savings was so much to deal with China that you'd be a fool to spend more to get the identical product. It wasn't like the stuff you got from China was subpar. It was equal to what would be manufactured here. Just their industrial base and the way they manufacture things is just so far ahead. We're probably going to spend the next decade, if organic manufacturers start and we include automations, might not have the big jobs bounce that everybody hopes that manufacturing renew, because there's a lot of robots that can do what human beings do. But what we're doing is we're taking child labor, producing a good in China at next to nothing, and having robots that need to be built, service, manufactured by somebody. And then you get this cascading effect where if we're not going to source the robots from Japan or China, we give a lot of different industries a chance to create supply chains here in the United States. So I think, like I said, there's about 50% upside here. If this goes the way that I hope it goes, we get we get advantages and fairness back in the system. This goes sideways, and it's just a trade war that breaks the economy down and has uncertainty and volatility over the next year. And that's not a great scenario, and that's not one that I hope we end up with. Thankfully, it's happening now when the United States is still strong to be able to pull off these moves. They're not moves of kindness or generosity. These are moves of, close to active war type of things. Where in years past, we would have had conquest where we'd go to a country and just use our military machine to take over the resources that we need. This is a economic warfare where when they say trade war, that's not just a euphemism. We are warring with countries using leverage. There's casualties and unintended consequences, just like any war would be, with the end result is you have to get victory. You have to go hard. You have to double down, and you have to do it. So we're on that track. Over the weekend, we had Tim Walz. No, actually, I think it was early in the week. We had Tim Walz, and then we had a protest downtown. And I love that people are inspired and paying attention and feel inspired to share in that way. Not probably the most effective expression, but I just like that people are passionate and engaged in something. The only probably criticism I'll have for protesters is they say a lot of things that are untrue. You can have criticisms for politicians and government. I do every stinking day. But when you levy things that are untrue, it's hard to pay attention to you because your protest isn't about something that I can join with you to combat. At least if it's true, we can concede down. So if you're like, keep Elon Musk away from Social Security, okay, that's fine. I'm with you so far. Let's not cut Medicaid. Let's not cut Medicare. Let's not cut Social Security. So I go to Elon Musk and say, hey, stay away from Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid. And he's like, yeah, we're not touching it. We're just getting rid of fraud people who are abusing the system. Oh, okay. Well, they thought you over here. They're going to limit it. Do you know why that they would say something like that? Oh yeah, because I shared my opinion a couple times that I think Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. Probably shouldn't have said that publicly, being I'm going to be touching Social Security, but the two are connected. Even though I think that it should be replaced with something that's more a better deal for the consumer, that has nothing to do with me going in there and cutting out fraud from Social Security. So I come back to you and say, oh, I know you made the sign that stay away from Social Security, but they told me over there that they're not going to do that. And all I need to know is, like, do you have some evidence that they are going to do that other than you connected two statements, an opinion of somebody with the work that they're doing? It's a fear and it's a beginning of a curiosity, but they said they're not going to do it and they haven't done anything like that. So I guess we'll help underscore it and keep reminding them that we don't want them through this portion of it to cut Social Security. But when you make that the premise of your protest, and then it's not something that is happening anyway, it's weird because you're attracting an argument where there isn't a problem when there are other problems. If you've got a problem with, we'll say this tariff stuff, and you have a beginning argument that we shouldn't be doing it in this way, whatever, that's the beginning of a conversation I can actually have with you because you've got some merit behind it. But if Trump's a Nazi, Elon's a Nazi, they're going to cut Social Security, I can go right down the list and say, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think so. And then I'm thinking like, well, what really are you protesting? If you didn't want to bring out the reality of things that are actually happening and you just made up some stuff that isn't happening, and that's the formation of the weirdest protest I can think of. Like even when the circus used to come to town, there were protesters that were actually protesting the animals, right? But the stuff that they were saying was true. And so then you can decide whether or not, all right, you think that having animals perform in a circus is inhumane and shouldn't have it. Cool. We got the beginnings of a conversation because it's actually happening. But it's extremely difficult to have an argument about things that are in the vacuous vapor and not actually happen. What's the beginning part of the conversation? So you don't like them. That's understood. You didn't vote for them. And again, that's what I like most about it is at least people left their couch, used their passions to get out on the street and had a chance to say stuff and vocalize and show just with that, the true sheer number that came down that, that there's a contingent that are displeased. And I think that's important to our discourse, but just say true things. That's all. And then Tim Walz, and I don't know how or why this is something he got a major response, and I'm not entirely sure why Tim Walz. This was a VP candidate for Kamala Harris, and they did not win the election. The guy didn't have a really good showing through the election. Didn't come across as someone who was, the top tier of the intellects of politics. And so that's the questioning of like, why him? So out there listening, why did you go see him? Why are you putting support behind someone like him? I know the local Democrats just wanted to embarrass Michael Rowley, and that's, from a political party, you'd 100% expect that they take advantage of what they're being given. So if Michael Rowley doesn't want to do, town hall meetings for whatever reasons they came up with, you get criticism when you do those things. So pick your heart. So either you do the town halls and know that they're going to be a bunch of people that just try to embarrass you, or don't do the town halls. And then because you won't do them, people are going to try to embarrass you. You're in a position of politics where you're going to have enemies and they're going to take advantage of everything you give them. And maybe if the advisor said, well, the criticisms of me not doing it are less than the criticisms if I do it. And that's the one we're going to go with. And again, that's just, political advantage. I don't think really is a coward over this. I think the upside for doing a town hall when all it's going to be is a bunch of people yelling at you is a really, it's a really low bar. So 330-595-1600. If you want to comment during this program, I'll read your comments on the air. And later on today, Kelin and I will be going on 570, filling in for Ron Verb today before the Guardians game. And so if you want to check out more political discussion with their group of callers, that's something we'd appreciate you listening over there as well. And it's distinctly different. Like the difference between the people who can listen to content through podcasting and streams and the people who listen to terrestrial radio, there's a huge divide. And so we're going to make a big effort to take some of the technologies, and I hope in the next couple of years it gets easier and more intuitive for older people to be able to listen to their stuff. But right now it's a little clumsy, and you and I can do it. But if you're sitting in a shop somewhere and you have a radio, you're allowed to listen to the radio there, and you put it on a channel and you listen the whole day through and keep it on, versus start and stop of turning on a different podcast or playing a playlist from your phone. It's a little clumsier. So hopefully in the future, this kind of content, long form content, finds a way in front of consumers who would be eating this stuff up. Dennis says that was a campaign event designed to generate sound bites. Yeah. And it was strategy wise. I can see why you would do it. Tim Walz still had name recognition and using that while he still has it. Who was Hillary's VP candidate? It would be hard for me to remember his name. And so you probably only have 6 or 8 months before Tim Walz is even a name that we remember what he did or why he was relevant in the conversation. So taking advantage of that name recognition, at least for a little bit, is probably, I'm with you, Dennis. I think that's probably what the strategy is. And, from the national Democrats, they know that they have to retool, right? And they have to put a strategy together to break away from some of these 80-20 things and capture more of the mainstream to get, a voting bloc that can win them another election. And if they don't start now, if their criticisms aren't deep right now, and they don't pull that strategy and they don't claw people back, they're sitting ducks for a little while. I got a phone call here. Let me go ahead and take this. See who you are. Oh, and Dennis said Tim Kaine was Hillary's running mate. All right, let's see. All right, caller, you're on the line.
Yes, hello. I happen to be protesting Tim Walz across the street from Dior, along with about 20 other patriots. They had a heckler out there that was just heckling for over an hour at us. It was so ridiculous. But I did see some of his town hall. I think the Youngstown Business Journal had a video out there. And he was just gaslighting everyone. I mean, talking about how he wants safe cities. Well, Minnesota, the Twin Cities, are some of the most unsafe cities in the country. They have the most unsafe light rail in the country, for one thing. And they just have carjackings off the charts. I mean, 1 month they had 700 carjackings in just 1 month. And they have something there called the Minnesota Freedom Fund, where they collect donations to bail people out of jail. So if you've committed murder, armed carjacking, rape, whatever it is, the Minnesota Freedom Fund will get you right out of jail. Kamala Harris also supported that. And Tim Walz, being governor of a state that even has such a thing, it's a joke that he would talk about safety of cities at a town hall. I just find that repulsive. And he lorded over some of the craziest, well, just to give you an example, in 2022, they have a $17 billion surplus, okay, of state income taxes from corporate and residents. And they're projected to have a $6 billion deficit by the year 2026. Mm-hmm. So this guy cannot manage money. He just washes it down the drain. And it's like nobody knows anything about him. He's from a tiny state. I just happen to know because I live there. He also had a huge scandal called Feeding Our Future. And it was money from the Department of Agriculture to feed during COVID, like over the summer, poor communities and this and that. Well, over 20 people have been indicted for fraud of $250 million. So, he comes to Youngstown, he talks to the people, he sounds like such a great guy. Nothing could be further from the truth. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. So was it a true town hall where he talked to citizens, and like that exchange would be weird because usually town halls are your representative and you're talking about things within your community, or was it just a stump speech where he just did stage stuff?
Well, they just showed, I think it was the Youngstown Business Journal. Somebody put a video of like maybe say 3 minutes out of it. He was talking, but I think he did take some questions from the audience. I don't know how long it lasted because we didn't stay as protesters across the street. We had to leave. The weather got bad. So I don't know how long he was there, but I do think he took questions. But just the way he presents himself is just a joke, okay? Running such a deficit after you collected all this surplus of taxes from a tiny state, by the way, 5.6 million people, and you have this $17 billion surplus. And then a couple years later, you're going to have a deficit of $6 billion. That's crazy, And it's just such a good thing that ticket didn't win, because I don't think anybody knew anything about him or really paid attention. It was all more like they just disliked President Trump. And it's a good thing because we dodged a bullet with this guy.
All right. Thank you so much for the call, 17. Glad you checked in.
Mm-hmm.
330-595-1600 if you want to call the program. And, strategy-wise, like if I were advising that group and if I had a roster of well-known Democrats who, we put down what is the goal of the Democrat Party? Is it opposition to President Trump, or is it something that is a higher calling, whether socialized medicine or, economic development or renewable energy, of all the stuff during the Biden administration and during the Obama administration? At least they were able to convey what they stood for. And I think that's selling a message on what you stand for rather than just being anti-Trump is what they've got to decide on, who they are, what their identity is. But if your roster, okay, so you have a place like Youngstown, Ohio, in a swing state that is purple and could go either way, and you're trying to dethrone and trying to claw back what you once had as far as support goes, taking your recognizable names and sending them out on and stumping would be a really good idea. Bernie Sanders, that would make complete sense, has appeal for the people that you're trying to pull to your side of the argument. And he's got a lot of support. That's why I just find Tim Kaine was maybe the only guy willing to do it, or maybe the roster is just very shallow at this point. But that's, if you put on a marketing campaign and taking your most persuasive argumenters and putting them out in the field and sending them to swing states to claw back, that is a brilliant strategy. And it's something that I think they need to do. But that's, like I said, Tim was probably not someone who I would have picked out to be that spokesperson for the Democrats' ideals. I mean, they're all saying the same stuff. So when you line up the videos about what they are stumping for, it is very much anti-Trump. And I don't know. I don't think that works out for you. I really think you got to drill into something that gets reasonable voters back on your side again. You lost a lot of blue collar support and, manufacturing base and whatnot. And so, they got a long road ahead of them. My theory is that a lot of the institutions that are getting broken up by Doge right now were mechanisms to help Democrats get elected. The money that they spent, the exchange, running marketing campaigns, but doing it with government funds, that kind of thing. Plus the open borders meant that you tried to naturalize a bunch of people to become voters and add to your voting base by a lot of the policies. So it wasn't about, refugees or seeking asylum. It was about importing as many new voters as you possibly could. So, but if those mechanisms, either the academic institutions or the NGO groups that are being broken up, and even the illegal immigrants who are getting voting privileges, all that gets broken up, and that's less voters that you have. And that was probably the overall plan. And given another 4 years of allowing illegals to come into this country and converting them to voters, that would have ensured Democrat rule for the foreseeable future. But you take out the fraud in voting with requiring ID and cleaning up the voter rolls, and I think I read yesterday that a new rule that if you drop ballots off at the box, you are only allowed to drop off one ballot at the very most your immediate family. So if you got 3 ballots and it's your wife and maybe your 20-some-year-old son, you could drop off 3, but no more dropping off a cache of harvested ballots anymore. And I think that kind of shores things up a little bit and reduces the amount of fraud. You'll never really get rid of fraud in voting, but if you can do a lot of things that shore it up and make it so that reasonable people trust the process, I think that's advantage. But all these things create disadvantage for the Democrats. Now, what happened in Wisconsin, I think it was Wisconsin, Supreme Court can ungerrymander, that word, taking away the districting for these voting and creating new representatives based on population densities. So if your marketing machine is gone, if you can then add more, justices to the Supreme Court, or you can redistrict and create more representatives in Democrat-controlled areas. I mean, these mathematical things are going to offset some of the loss in some of the institutions that they gave Democrats the advantage. But this little chess match is going to go on for the next 4 years for sure, as Republicans try to pull that advantage off and Democrats try to add new advantage in. It'll make things pretty interesting. And I said it was going to get pretty wild after the election. And this is exactly what I pictured how it happens. Dennis says there's no way they would use systems of control influence to churn out obedient followers. And yeah, he's a little tongue in cheek there. Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, Democrats do really well when there is fear and there are dependents. If you get all of your services and your prosperity from government and they can reward you with those benefits, you're then beholden to the person that will give you the most stuff out of government. If government becomes boring and they don't really dole out anything to anybody, then the lines of dependence dry up and there's less troughs to feed from. And so you become more independent rather than just being a, subservient to the government. But that is a strategy. If you can pull it off, make it legal, make dependence, it's evil. Like, it's definitely not what I would have in mind for any person. Would I take a person I cared about and then set the stage for them to become a dependent on the state who's really bad at servicing needs of the person, all along blaming everything except for the people who baited you into becoming a dependent, and blaming other people other than you. I mean, it's this wicked slide that, getting less people needing things from a boring government is really the way that I see the Republicans being in a horizon of going to be really hard to challenge. And there'll be a new iteration. These are smart people who are do things. They all have legal minds, so they know how to skirt just close enough to winning that they can't get in trouble or aren't going to go to jail and not legal. And the displeasure that we have, like, if you run a straight up campaign and you tell no lies and you make it about what you're going to do, versus a polished politician who lies about their enemy, impugns their character, might not anybody be true, but it's super effective and gets people turned against them. When you find out, and when you really look into it, does it turn your stomach that they pulled off an effective campaign that got the job done, even if they did it in a slimy and dirty way? Or are you like, and I've been told this, by the way, that the person that played the straight up game and didn't play the political games, they didn't get elected. And that was kind of stupid. If you're going to play that game, you better be good at playing the game. And, I was considering running for a congressional district, and I brought in a couple of people who have run campaigns before, and I shared with them what I was going to do. I'm pro business, and I don't really want to get sucked into the full political adventure. I just want to do the part where I can use my skill set to represent constituents, and I don't want to play the game. They paused, thinking I was going to say more, and I did say a little bit more in that conversation. But they said, "Do you want to be elected?" And I was like, "Well, if it resonates with voters, I'll be elected. If that doesn't resonate, then I won't be elected." But the consultant is not interested in taking on a contender that doesn't have it in their brain that this is something they're going to win. If you're a consultant and you're in charge of a campaign that loses, their job is to win. Like, if you hire a defense attorney and the defense attorney is there to help you win and defend against that your case, they don't want to be on a team that hem-haws and gives in advantage for the sake of honesty. You want them to be all in on proving that you are not guilty of these charges. And so anyway, 330-595-1600. I'm going to wrap things up here in a minute. I got to get a bunch of, and here's one thing I wanted to mention. This economy right now is amazing. Like, it is, I have never experienced what I'm experiencing right now. We typically, when we do hiring, we talk to other companies about how they're sourcing labor and if there's effectively enough people to fill all the roles that they have and how many open positions do they have. And right now, we usually get about 2 or 3 resumes, good quality resumes. We get 10 resumes per month, but 2 or 3 really, really good ones to sort through. And we do the interviewing process. We got inundated with over 50 resumes already in these last 2 weeks. And of those candidates, they are really high quality people, really good. And so I'm thinking, like, where were these people last year, before this election? And my contention, and I don't know if enough time has passed for this to be true, but it's my contention that there were a lot of talent that was wrapped up and paralyzed from participating in the real marketplace. And when you shake things up a little bit, and you start, let's just say government worker gets released. Now they're free to go operate in the private sector that very much needs their talent. When you're locked up in government, you're not really being exercised the way that you could be in the private sector, because there's no motivation to get high productivity out of someone when you're in government. It's the opposite. It's the least amount of stuff you can do, and the most wage that you can fetch for it. Well, when private industry was competing against something on the public side could beat us in wages every time because they could just write infinite checks. But when you release that talent back into the private sector, then companies that produce things and make the wheels move, they have access to talent that they didn't have before. So that's my contention, is that through all of the catalyst of releasing those people wised up and said, okay, well, I got to start paying attention about exchange of good value to someone who's willing to pay me for it. And then the mentality shifted a little bit. It might be government workers peppered in there, but it seems to me like something significant changed in labor, and a ton more have come through my door. And I've asked around with other people, and they're not seeing it in such high density that I am. But we'll see over the coming months and quarters whether or not everybody's complaining that they just can't find people that will show up for work and fill these positions that we have. All right, wrapping up here. We'll catch you later on 570 as I fill in for Ron Ferb, and then the MLO brothers will be here tomorrow doing their show at 9:00. I thank you everybody who chimed in, phone calls, chat messages, all that kind of stuff. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. This is original Youngstown content. Feel free to share our videos and tell your friends about us. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook.